Hello and welcome to a new tutorial video series that I plan on doing. And for the first episode, we're just going to get as basic as you can get and talk about how to even play Smite. Now, just to be a smart aleck for a minute, I don't mean how to download the game and set it up, obviously. I mean, what are you going to do when you first load into the game, have probably played the tutorial, and let's be real, the tutorial doesn't do a great job of actually showing you how to play the game. So, play the tutorial, about to get into a real game. Well, first let's talk about what Smite is. And Smite is a MOBA. Now, a MOBA means multiplayer online battle arena. Now, that doesn't really mean anything. What a MOBA actually is kind of part strategy, part fighting game, kind of, and part role-playing game. You have, I think there's about to be 99 characters. Let's just say 100 for sake of simplicity. 100 characters, or gods, to choose from in this case. And each one with their own unique set of 4 abilities, and each one has a passive. We'll get into that later, possibly not even in this episode, and maybe more into specific gods. But regardless, it's part strategy because there's a lot of thinking and planning that goes into team fights or lane pushing or stuff like that, or item building, of course. It's part fighting game because there is still like some skill that you have to have in orchestrating the right attacks at the right time, the right abilities at the right time, and stuff like that. And of course, it's partially RPG because there is a leveling up system, a item buying system, a skill, not really skill tree, but you still invest your levels into skills and stuff like that. And of course, there's so many characters to choose from, and there is a few different classes to choose from. So that's essentially what a MOBA is. Now, I mentioned the classes. Well, there are 5 different classes in Smite. So there is the Assassin class, and if you've ever played any other MOBA, the Assassin class is typically your jungler. There are always going to be exceptions to every class that I'm about to talk about, but for the sake of simplicity, the Assassin is the jungler. 9 times out of 10, they have really high single target damage output, which means that they can take one person who's kind of, maybe a little bit behind the group, or going a little too far into the jungle where they don't need to be, or just too far out of the team fight in general, and you can just burst them down from 100 to 0 pretty quickly. They also are normally pretty good at taking down jungle buffs. I don't really think jungle bosses by themselves, maybe sometimes at higher levels, probably not the toughest jungle boss, but they're really good at securing jungle buffs, and possibly at higher levels even doing jungle bosses with little to no help, and bursting down people from 100 to 0. That's your typical assassin. Your typical warrior is going to be kind of a jack of all trades. They're going to essentially want to defend the team while also putting out damage, while also setting up for the team, but also following through with the characters that might have better setup. And that might sound kind of like a lot here, but I will give an example for this one, because I do think that warrior is kind of a hard role to define, because they do kind of do everything. So if we're looking at Odin, for example, and if you've never played the game before and you're kind of wondering what a warrior can do, and if we look at Odin, so he has one ability that can pretty much jump onto somebody and do a lot of damage. He has one ability that gives him a shield that can be used to just protect himself or make that jump even stronger. He has another ability that can slow down a target if he hits with them. It doesn't do a lot of damage, but it does set up for some for some team battling, or even just set up for a leap from Odin himself. And then his ultimate puts down a ring of spears that allows you to pretty much trap your enemies in a set location. So as you can tell, he can have some damage, he has setup, he has team fighting like potential, and he's defensive, and that's kind of just what the warrior does in general. If you've played other MOBAs, the warrior is generally the top laner, though I'd say if you've actually played Smite, you know that's less and less true. But regardless, that's kind of what they're supposed to do, right? So the Guardian is your basic support. They are to go in duo lane if you've played other MOBAs, and I would say if I had to pinpoint what they do, and of course there's exceptions to the rule, but they set up a team fight. So if we look at Ymir, and all jokes aside about how powerful he is, and he is really powerful, he has a freeze ability that can obviously set up massive damage. You pick someone on the enemy team, freeze them, and the rest of the team can just lay on them, kill them easily. He has another ability that can wall off certain people from the rest of the team, depending on how you lay down the wall and stuff like that. He has another ability that is just really a damaging ability that also slows them, so still some setup. And of course, his ultimate is just a giant explosion that you can charge up and deal massive amount of damage to an area of around him. So he has a lot of setup, but also a little bit of what's called peel, which is just essentially shredding down their defenses and shutting down their health to make sure that the more damaging roles can pick off a kill, right? So that's kind of what the Guardian does overall. And it's not to say that there's not some powerful Guardians out there, because there are, but it is just to say that overall a Guardian is meant to set up kills more than necessarily chase them down. And of course, your most important role as a Guardian, and I would say this about any of these Guardians, is to protect your weaker allies, the allies that can't take a hit as well as you can. Then we have mages, and I'd say this is probably the least distinguished role. There's so many different ways that a mage can be played, but generally speaking, your mage is your mid laner. They are ability-focused characters. So what I mean by this is, whereas assassins might put a lot of, a lot of items to kind of strengthen their auto attacks, and especially hunters, which we'll get to them. And it's not to say all assassins, of course. There are definitely ability-based assassins as well, but mages, more so than I'd say any other class, want their abilities to hit hard. Their auto attacks aren't really going to do much, but their abilities can completely shred you down from 100 to 0 pretty quickly. So when a mage gets on cooldown, as it's called, which basically means has used all their abilities, they are less threatening. But when they have their abilities up, and of course if you invest in cooldown reduction, meaning that you get your abilities faster, you become even more potent with mages. Now, it's not to say that you can't play a mage that does invest in auto attacks. It's also not to say you can't play a mage that is also kind of a jungler or an assassin. And heck, it's even been seen to play a mage guardian. And heck, one of the mages even was a guardian back in the day. So, and of course there are mage solo laners as well. I don't know if this still happens as much, but I'd say mage can pretty much be played in any position. But typically they're your mid laners who typically rely on heavy burst damage. So now we have, last but not least, the hunter or the AD carry. Attack damage carry is what that stands for. If you ever see anybody say ADC or anything like that, these guys will be played in your duo lane if you're coming from another MOBA. which I'll explain all of this when we get into the specific game modes, because obviously if you just want to come and play basically any game mode besides Conquest, none of these terms really mean anything to you, right? But anyway, so attack damage carry essentially means that you're playing a character that wants to carry the late game. So all of these characters, of course there's an exception or two, I would say most of them, though, really shine late game. And I'd say none of them are bad late game, but most of them are going to shine late game because they have their build online. Basically, they've had enough time to invest the gold that they've accumulated over the game into enough items to make their auto attacks really hurt, or their abilities really hurt. And there's I'd say very few ability-based ability-based hunter characters. That might not be true. I'm looking through and there's a few, but still, your main source of damage on these characters are going to be from your auto attacks. And once you hit late game, you should be able to shred most everybody, including Guardians, who take one too many auto attacks from you. So now that we've talked about the characters a little bit and the roles that they play, let's just kind of get into how to play in general. So we're going to go to a jungle practice for this, and here's our character select screen, right? And this is going to change constantly. They bring in a new character or god once every about month or so, I'd say. For this, we're going to play an assassin because it's my main role, and we're going to play my main character. But this is just kind of to show you how to play, not necessarily talking about like specific characters, right? So when you, like I said, when you get into a Smite game, every character has 4 abilities and a 5th passive ability. Now, a passive ability is going to be something that you don't ever have to do anything to really activate, so to speak. Now, there's exceptions to this rule. Some actives do have to get, like, I guess, online through other means, like auto attacks, or you might have to have a certain amount of gold, or, you know, something like that. But overall, actives, unlike your other 4 abilities, like, if we look at this is my 1, as it's called, my first ability, which for Ratatasker is the dash. If we look at this, I'm pressing 1 to get this little line of sight and to see where I'm going to dash, and if I click, I used it, right? Pretty obvious. Now, my active, I never really do that, though. There's not a specific button that I really press to activate it on. I'm still going to say there's probably an exception to the rule. Not coming to mind off the top of my head. Agni's passive is kind of coming to my mind in the back of my head, but it's still, you don't really activate it, quote unquote. It's still something that happens with or without your consent, essentially. It's just you can plan around it. Anyway, getting way off track here. So if you press K, you can actually look at these. Now, I would recommend looking at these before you play, but I'm also realistic. You're going to get hasty. You're going to want to play. It's boring to get into a game and instantly start studying, right? But there's a lot of text on a lot of these abilities. Now, essentially, for all intents and purposes, what Ratatasker's passive is for me is that if I'm outside of what's referred to as the fountain, or essentially the area where we can buy items, like if this, yeah, see, we can't buy any items out here, right? Well, I actually can buy my acorn out here. So pretty much until I get a full acorn, I can buy it from anywhere outside of the fountain. Now, see what I mean by that's still kind of an activated ability. I still had to do something, but it wasn't like I pressed, 1 and lined up a shot and, clicked a button to do it. It was just go to the items, click my acorn, and I can get it, right? The second part of his passive is on my abilities, which I have 4 of. I can heal based on a percentage of my power if it hits an enemy. Now, I don't know how exactly I'm going to show that on here. I guess she can hurt me, can't she? Alright, do something. Okay. So she's hurt me a little bit. Well, did I even heal off that?
Blood.
Okay, I don't even know if I healed off that. I think I did. I mean, surely I did, because that's my passive. But yeah, so all of my abilities will heal me regardless of if I do anything, if I have lifesteal or not. So that's kind of cool. We can build a lot of power on Ratatasker and have essentially some heals. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, okay. I healed. It's just I was getting damaged really quickly. Anyway, so yeah, those are your 4 abilities. And let's go ahead and just build
Time to stop this once and for all.
my guy up. I guess you don't need to really think about it here, but I still want to have a build that's gonna be decent, I suppose. Let's throw in a curveball. Throwing a real curveball over here. No, let's not throw in that much of a curveball. Let's throw in a curveball just to get a lot of power. Anyway, so one thing that is important to note is that your items are a lot more important, honestly, than your actual level. Now, this, I could see some people debating this, but I don't really think it's up for that much debate.
Dubs, baby.
I mean, the amount of power your items give you as opposed to the amount of power you get when you level up is just a lot more in favor of the items. But that being said, when you level up, you do, as most RPGs, get more power, more defense, more health, all that good stuff. And of course, as you can see below, I'm level 3 now, so I can invest in another ability. Every level, you get another, I think it's just called ability point. I'm positive, but anyway, I'll call it ability point, and you can invest it in whatever you want. If you're playing Conquest, which for most intents and purposes is considered the main game mode, you start off at level 1 and can only invest 1 into one ability. But in most other game modes, you start off at level 3, and then Assault, you start off at level 5, and you can invest them as you see fit for level 3 and level 5. Now, there are some caps to levels at certain levels, like level 3, you can't put 3 points into one skill, you have to put 2 into one into the other at max. I want to say at level 7, it's like you can't have a skill at level 5 yet, and stuff like that. So I guess that's the only 2 examples, really. But anyway, so in most game modes besides Arena, the goal is to essentially get to their Titan. And to do that, yeah, in every game mode besides Arena, I suppose, you have to push their tower. And to do this, normally, you're going to want a horde of minions with you and no enemy gods around you. There we go. Okay. And, yeah, I mean, sorry, I guess I thought I had something else to say about that. But no, that's pretty much it. You want to have a horde of minions with you most of the time. At higher levels, you can sometimes do it without minions, but I wouldn't recommend it at first. And you want to make sure there's not enemy gods around you, and you also want to make sure that there's not a team fight that your team needs you for. Being aware of the map, being aware of your god, and how fast they can take down a tower, and being aware of your potential in a team fight, and how necessary it's going to be for you to be in it, or how much you can really afford to go off and do a tower. All that knowledge you'll gain over time. But essentially you're going to want to take towers. In most game modes you'll have jungle bosses. We talked about these guys. And am I actually... Let's see. Yep, I can take them by myself. Look at that. But jungle bosses are nice to give your team an advantage. So we did a jungle buff over here, and in arena that's all you get. But for other game modes, jungle bosses. So this jungle buff, right, gives me power, but no one else on my team gets this, right? Only I get it, unless you get the enemy's red buff as well, and then you can give someone else another red buff. But for getting this red buff, only I get the power increase, right? I really doubt I can do this by myself, but we're gonna try. But if we get the fire giant for everybody, then yeah, okay, I can't. There's no way I can do this. Well, let's die trying. Okay. So, but if I would have succeeded and got the fire giant, instead of just me getting a buff, my entire team gets a buff. And with Gold Fury, your entire team gets gold. And for Bull Demon, your entire team, I don't remember if they get a buff or not. I know they get health regeneration. And of course, the tower gets deactivated, or Phoenix, but that's game mode specific, so I don't want to talk too much about that right now. And of course, in most game modes, you will have a lane that you're fighting a particular enemy on, and laning is super important. We'll get into that in another episode. It's not really basic friendly, but just know that killing minions and having control of your lane is really important for most game modes. I'd say even outside of Conquest. I'd even argue even in Arena it's important to just focus minions and make sure that they aren't getting too out of hand. Anyway, I actually think that's all I want to mention for the basics of Smite. Hopefully after watching this, if you're new to MOBAs, or just particularly new to Smite, and just want to see kind of what it is, what all the hubbub is about. And I understand it's, 5-year-old game, but this is something that I wanted to do for to start the series, and I want to go into more detailed kind of how-tos and guides later. But anyway, I hope this helped somebody out there, and we will see you next time.